Hi guys, Skell here. So, for a second video challenge we said read an extract from the book you last read. Well, gotta be honest, slight ulterior motive for that one. As some of you know, I'm trying to write a Doctor Who novel, and so I thought I'd read an extract from that. Hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1. The crashing waves against the rocks along the shoreline were mere background noise. John stood on the beach skimming pebbles into the sea. He was lost and submerged in his own thoughts. John hadn't much really cared for the seaside for some time now, and avoided this beach in particular for many years. John, nearing 60, was a tall, slim man whose face looked tired and worn, and brown hair combed neatly to the side, with wise eyes that looked as if they seemed the fair share of pain and loss, with an odd flick that shone youthful exuberance. This beach had taken something he'd held dearly for what seemed like an eternity, and then in a blink of an eye she was gone. John's wife spent a number of years dealing with the same loss, but she seemed to get over it more quickly than John. Maybe it was just she was happy to be with him, or maybe it was their children, or maybe she just was so buried in her own work that she didn't give herself time to deal with the loss. After a number of hard years, she slowly talked him round, and eventually he'd given in, and they started going there for their annual holiday. This was the first year they'd brought their children, Sarah and John Jr., or JJ for short, who were happily playing chasing in and out, trying to dodge the waves as the tide came in. "Come on kids, time to go," John heard his wife shout. Sarah and JJ ran past their father, who just stood there staring out to sea. "John, are you listening?" John snapped out of his head and turned round with his old beaming smile. "Yes, Rose, I'll be right there." Rose, in her 50s, or late 40s as she insisted everyone, was stood by a large black 4x4 waiting for the kids to come running to her. Rose stood patiently waiting for the kids to reach her, with her long blonde hair blowing in the wind and dark green eyes wide open. As the kids got nearer, she knelt down on one knee and both the kids charged into Rose's open arms. She scooped them both up into her arms and they each kissed one of her cheeks. Rose sat the kids back down to the ground and opened the rear door of the car, and Sarah and JJ scrambled into the back seat. JJ slipped on his seatbelt. "Haha, I beat you, Sarah," he mocked. "You cheated," Sarah insisted. "Settle down, kids, while I go get your father," Rose said firmly. JJ and Rose turned and nodded with obedience, but as soon as Rose had shut the door and started to walk away, they started to fight amongst themselves again. "John!" she called. John flicked his last pebble into the ocean, and it gracefully skipped across the sea. Here he was, John Smith, stranded on Earth, half human, half Time Lord, happily married to the love of his life, Rose, with 2 wonderful children on the last day of their holiday. A far cry from being the Doctor, Time Lord, traveller of the cosmos, and to many a hero, even if he didn't like admitting it. He always saw himself as being in the right place, at the right time, doing the right thing. Rose by now had reached him and took him by the hands with a smile. "Come on, love, it's getting cold. Let's go have a brew." John smiled again and nodded, and they started to make their way back to the car. John had put his past behind him the first time they arrived on that beach. He promised himself he'd forget and move on, but sometimes his old lives would echo around in his brain. Those days with this ship, the TARDIS, that stood for Time and Relative Dimensions in Space. A ship that could take him anywhere in time and space. He had so many adventures with all those amazing people, but then everything ends, he told himself. Rose walked round to get on the driver's side. Rose always drove, that was the rule, and John didn't stand a chance to argue. Rose leant back round to sort out Sarah and JJ, who were still fighting. John was about to open the passenger side door when in the distance he heard a wheezing, groaning sound that he hadn't heard for many, many years. A sound he'd never forget, a sound he dearly missed. His heart quickened, his eyes widened, and his old instincts kicked in. So there you have it, the opening passage to my Doctor Who story. I hope you enjoyed it. It's still work in progress, and only time will tell. Who knows? I could be a novelist after all.